Hello and welcome to another episode of Laptop Retrospective, and today I have what I call a special guest. And this is a special guest because this is actually the newest ThinkPad that I have ever featured on this channel, and I've been doing this for a while now. As you can imagine, with a name like Retrospective, you don't get the opportunity to look at too many newer laptops, so this is actually kind of exciting for me because I know a lot about ThinkPads, the heritage, and some of the older models. But when it comes to the newer models, unfortunately, I know very little. What we actually have here today is the T470s, and this is pretty near a fully spec'd out model. There's only a handful of things that this version doesn't have, and we'll dive into that in a minute. A few things that we do need to note right off the bat, though, are some key differences between the T470s and the T460s, its predecessor. While they do have the same chassis, there are some key differences. First off, there is no dedicated GPU option on the T470s. However, they do offset that with a Thunderbolt 3 port. And I do say offset because it is highly likely that they sacrificed the PCIe lanes on the board to add that port. We also, because of that, have USB Type-C charging, and they had two adapters, either a 45 watt or a 65 watt. However, if you still would like to use, say, the classic charger, it still remains over here. It is also worth noting that this laptop came in two large CPU varieties. It did come in Skylake, which I will list over here, and then it also came in the newer Kaby Lake style, which I will list over here. As you can see, there are lots of options, and if you do see an older CPU list, that is actually common for these. However, this one is actually a i7-7600U, so it is top tier. A few other things to note in terms of specifications while we're talking about it is they do feature Intel HD graphics, either a 520 or a 620 depending on the configuration. If you are looking to plug in an external display, the USB Type-C connector will support 4096 by 2304 at 60 Hertz, whereas HDMI is supporting 4096 by 2160 at only 24 Hertz. When it comes down to display varieties, you have three options with this beautiful lay flat panel, as you'd expect from a ThinkPad. We do have a 920 by 1080 display, a 920 by 1080 touch display, and the one that you see before you here, the 2560 by 1440 WQHD or QHD display. Other specifications that are worth discussing is the RAM. It is DDR4, and there is either 4 or 8 gigabytes soldered to the board with a maximum expansion in a single DIMM slot of 16 gigs, totaling either 20 or 24 gigabytes. Solid-state drives are the M.2 2280 variety, and they came in either SATA or NVMe flavors. And it is worth noting that NVMe can be retrofitted if it did come with a SATA originally. A second SSD is not possible in the 2242 slot, regrettably. That slot remains reserved only for the 3G modem. In terms of Wi-Fi, you had three major types, either Intel dual-band wireless AC 8260 or 8265, and then finally a tri-band wireless AC 18265. A few other items that are definitely worth noting is this beautiful trackpad down here has what's called a 3M crystal silk coating. It does make it quite nice to the touch. A fingerprint reader would be optional on these models. As you can see, this one does not include it, as well as a smart card reader, which the slot exists. However, it is not currently occupied on this model. Moving right along to ports, let's go ahead and discuss what exactly you get with the T470s. Despite its thin nature, it is still quite port-rich, all things considered. If we start our quest on the left-hand side, we do have the classic rectangular power plug, USB 3.0, as well as the exhaust for the CPU, the headphone microphone combo jack, and thank goodness a full card slot. Along the back, we have absolutely nothing. And on the right-hand side is where a majority of our ports live. We have a Kensington lock slot, we have the SIM card tray, Ethernet, USB 3.0. It is worth noting this one over here is always on, HDMI, another USB 3.0 slot, and of course our Thunderbolt 3 port, and then the smart card slot if it is configured. Lastly, it is worth noting that on the bottom of this we do have a dock connector. And this will work with a variety of different docks, and I will list those up on the screen. You could also, of course, use a USB Type-C or Thunderbolt 3 dock as well. So your options are quite numerous on what exactly you plug into this. Last but not least, I will mention this is a dual battery system. We have one battery up here, which is the 23 watt-hour battery, and then another battery that would be down here, which is 26 watt-hours. This current unit is missing that bottom battery. However, that doesn't stop it from giving a pretty respectable battery life with only one of those batteries present, netting you approximately 4.5 to 5 hours. With both of those batteries in there, we can probably safely double that number. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me give you the quick tour on how to service one of these machines. Alright, as always, when you have an internal battery laptop, you do want to go into the BIOS and make sure that those batteries have been disabled. Once that is done, we can actually turn the machine over, and this is actually relatively easy to get into. The first thing that I will point out is actually having to do with the keyboard removal. There is a cross-threaded kind of screw post over here that indicates whether or not the keyboard is locked or unlocked. And as always, we do have some nice pictograms, so we're going to turn that to the unlocked position. Now that the keyboard has been unlocked, it is a simple, well, I shouldn't say simple matter, but it's just a matter of finding these tabs and pressing up. And what that will do is expose a variety of screws to remove the keyboard. The screws are located above the page down key, the comma key, the S key, the colon semicolon key, the F key, the left Alt key, and that would appear to be it. The keyboard is on two very short ribbon cables located in the bottom here. So it is recommended that it is turned vertically straight up and down, and then the two ribbon cables can be removed from the other side. So while it isn't as speedy as some, it still remains to be a relatively simple matter. We will note that once this is removed, there is absolutely nothing underneath here for us to service, and this would only just be part of disassembling either the entire computer or replacing the keyboard. Installation, of course, is the reverse of removal. So the basic disassembly is quite simple. There is just a series of screws around the outside edge of the machine that need to be spun out of place. We have 2 on the lower half of the unit, and then we have 3 along the top for a total of 5. Once those screws are loosened, we can simply just use a fingernail or a pry tool to reach under the top corner and begin to pop the case out of place. Once that is removed, we have access to all of the guts of this machine. So we'll start at the bottom and work our way up. The first few things to note, of course, is we do have 2 speakers downward firing at the bottom. We do have a small daughter board that contains the headphone microphone combo jack as well as the card slot. We do have our CMOS battery readily available. However, the battery, of course, for the bottom would cover that up. We do have the ribbon for the trackpad located here. And these 2 connectors, from what I could hazard a guess, would be for the fingerprint reader were it installed, and then the smart card reader if it was installed. We can see the battery connector over here for the bottom battery that is currently not present. And we have our single DIMM RAM slot. All of the other RAM is soldered to the other side of the board. We do have our CPU and cooler over here, as well as our M.2 drive located here. This would be where our modem card would go, and unfortunately is the only card that will work in that slot. Over here we do have our Wi-Fi card located off just to the left of that. We do have our display ribbon cable up here, as well as our secondary battery. And then over here we do have our power connector, as well as a few others. As you can see, most of these serviceable components, if not all of them, are facing upward in this chassis, which is a good sign, because that means that our teardown is relatively simple. So let's go ahead and put this all back together and do a boot test. All right, with everything back together, let's go ahead and turn this on. I have to say, this screen is awfully sharp looking, but one shouldn't be surprised by that given the resolution of the panel. And there we have it. We are in. As you saw when it booted up, we do have a 2-intensity backlight keyboard, as well as a whole slew of different commands along our function row to adjust as we need. Unsurprisingly, the trackpad is just an absolute joy to use, with gesture controls working fantastically smooth. And just the whole experience is snappy, it's sharp, it's very, very good. And this brings me to an interesting point that I actually wanted to close this video on, is to me, this is a fantastic computer. I don't think it's difficult to understand why. You've got a lot of features and a lot of performance packed into a very thin package. And of course, there will be some compromises with that, especially on how hard you can actually push those CPUs. But that's a problem pretty much on most modern laptops on the quest for thinness. The curiosity that I have is that when we're building T-series this thin, what does that leave for the X1 Carbon line? In the history that I have kind of been building up on the X1, it's like it's the thin, fast, light computer. Well, this is the thin, fast, light computer, and it's not an X1. So it is kind of an interesting curiosity in my mind, and I kind of hope that I get the chance to look at more newer Lenovo ThinkPads, because I want to know what those differences are, if any, anymore. Because to me, looking at this, and when it got pulled out of the bag and placed in front of me for review, I was thinking, oh boy, this is thin, it's slick, it's light. It really made me doubt that an X1 Carbon was kind of the go-to thin, light, reliable computer. And it might have opened up the door, or perhaps more accurately, Pandora's box, to what exactly might be my next computer. Because look at this thing. It's less than 20 millimeters thick, and it's phenomenal. It's got quite a few ports on it, and it's got a lot of functionality, and it's just like, wow. It leaves me confused. That's the bottom line. I'm genuinely confused because it blurs the lines, for better or for worse, between the X1 series, their thin and lights, and what's actually capable even on a T series. At any rate, ladies and gentlemen, if you are looking for one of these, they are slowly starting to come out onto the market as some of the shorter warranty periods for these are starting to wear down. They are running around the 500 Canadian dollar mark, depending on how they're spec'd out. But it is a certainly good buy in my books if you're going for the higher end versions. At any rate, if you do have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear what you think. And as always, I will encourage you to do the big four. Please like the video, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so the next time that hopefully I get the chance to feature a newer ThinkPad, you'll be the first to know about it. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.